What else would you get at this time of the year except Christmas memories? So, my friends, Christmas memories. Have you ever wondered how this time of the year our minds get flooded with memories of Christmas? I reckon there's three kinds of Christmas memories. There's the happy ones, there's the unhappy ones, and there's the ones you forgot. I don't know why you forget them, but you forget them. I would imagine most of you can remember childhood Christmases of cosy families and being together with your parents and your brothers and sisters and toys from Santa Claus and wandering through the town looking into toy shops and the wonder of the crib and stuff like that. And those are the happy Christmases that we all remember. And then as you get older, Christmases tend to take on a slightly different feel, and a certain amount of the happiness goes out of it. I then remember the Christmases with my own son, and you reprise that notion of how wonderful Christmas is. And we had a tradition in our house, my father used to do it, it was their family tradition, that the eldest son lit the candle, the Christmas candle, on Christmas Eve, and my son did it every year. But then you get on to the unhappy ones. And those are the ones where, after my father died, my mother used to come to visit us, and it was wonderful. And my son would be there with us, and my wife Margaret had one surviving family member or brother, and he would come. So you had these wonderful Christmases of us all together, enjoying what Christmas was, and Pete always brought these wonderful crackers and stuff like that. It was just enjoyable. But then these people started to disappear from our lives. My mother died, so the Christmas after she died was a little bit sad. And then my son left home, and that Christmas was really weird. And then a couple of years ago, Margaret's brother died, and we're now left, the two of us, in an empty house, rattling around in an empty house. And should I decorate the house? I don't know. And in some senses, Christmas takes on a dark, for me anyway, takes on a darkness that's a bit difficult to get out of sometimes. And I don't know whether it's just winter and we get a little bit depressed about it all. But then there's the third Christmas, and these are the Christmases you've forgotten about. This brought home to me recently. You remember that I went off after 40 years, went back to Kenya to visit my old school and old friends, etc. And we had a day to spare in Nairobi, and we went up to Karen. Karen is a lovely leafy suburb on the outskirts of Nairobi. It's named after Karen Blixen. You know Karen Blixen out in Africa. And we went up because her house was now open to the public. And when we were there in the 1970s, it wasn't open to the public. So we went up to Karen to visit. And as we were coming back from Karen Blixen's house, we passed the Karen Country Club. And suddenly there was a flood of memories. The Karen Country Club was one of these oddities. It was where the Whytes from the Highlands would come down around winter time in the small rains around Christmas time, and they would stay there. And it was a wonderful, wonderful building, big brick and wood building with a huge big bar in the front that opened out with a series of windows that opened out onto a big lawn that stretched off to the Ngong Hills. And if you sat there on occasions, you'd have leopards wandering past and so on and so forth. It was really out in the country. And by the 1970s, nobody knew what to do with Karen Country Club, because the Whytes were a little bit embarrassed. New independent Kenya, what will we do with the Karen Country Club? And the poor unfortunate newly independent Kenya didn't quite know what to do with it either. It became a place of refuge for expatriates like me who were living way out in the bush. And come Christmas, before Christmas, we would all pitch up. They used to have little huts out the back that you could stay. We'd all arrive in. And it was probably because all these people who were isolated out on their own in the middle of nowhere would get together, and we would have, I don't know, European white company. That comes to it all, culturally adaptable company. And there was a tradition in the Karen Country Club. We would all sit around in this big bar. Now this was before internet, and this was before television, and before piped music. And we would sit around and we would read books, because they had a big library, and we'd drink beer and we'd chat. And this tradition grew up that every year before Christmas, a group of people would get together and they would write to newspapers in the UK and in Europe, or they would write to magazines or journals about various bits and pieces. These are all, of course, totally invented. And you would sit down and you'd write these off. I remember two of them. The one that I remember most, or the one that I remember best was, I have to read the names out here. It was an anthropological study of the three wise men. And this was about 5 or 6 pages long. It was sent to archaeological journals all around Europe. And what these three professors from Mombasa University, they were set out to prove that the three wise men came from a very small little tribe halfway up Mount Kenya. And they went through all of this and they proved it wonderfully. And they signed it in the end, and it was signed by Professor Michael Mwango, Boniface Utari, and Nzaha Mpuvu. Now, these are real names, except for one little item. Mwangogo is a liar. It's the Kiswahili for liar. Utari is the Swahili for a fantasy. And Mzaha Mpuvu is for funny fools. So these were all sent off to these people. But the last year I was there, I was elected to take the lead in what became known as the letter. And I found the letter, by the way, in a little box at home just before we were going out to Kenya, you know, a box full of all my memories. And I found this this letter. We were sitting around reading newspapers, and quite often these newspapers were old newspapers that somebody had dropped off on their way home to England. And there was a copy of the Financial Times. And there was an ad in the Financial Times for head storekeeper for Unilever UK. So we sat around and we discussed this, and we came up with the letter. I'll read you the letter. This is to the Chief Personnel Officer, Unilever UK. It's from Harold Hargreaves, care of Karen Country Club, Karen, Nairobi, Kenya. I would like to apply for the post of head storekeeper in your main storage depot in London. I am at present in Nairobi overseeing the expansion of Vichwa Vidogo, the East African branch of Sira Selik, Java, and Kepela Mesil, Indonesia. I have worked for some 15 years for Kepela Mesil, 10 of which I was head storekeeper in our largest depot in Manaus, Brazil. Manaus, you will understand, is a city in the centre of Amazonia. And it required exceptional skills to maintain supply and distribution. The success of the Brazilian venture saw me move to our Javanese venture, Kepela Mesil. The modernisation of the island of Java created many problems in the late 1950s, but under my direction we were able to forge ahead and the consolidation of Indonesian independence under General Suharto. At present, we have depots all over the Indonesian archipelago. But you will understand that our most productive areas are the islands of Nusa Tenggara, Sulawesi, and of course, Borneo. My attached CV will explain all this in more detail. You will see I have all the skills, experience and drive to fill the position as advertised in the Financial Times on the 20th of November. Having spent 20 years overseas, I feel the time has come for me to return home, and the advertised position will benefit your company and my future plans. In the final analysis, you are looking for a head storekeeper, and I am the most qualified candidate. I have stored heads on 3 continents, so I have the skills. The Javoran tribes of the Amazon were our main Brazilian supplier, and as the world's most skilled shrinkers of heads, they were central to our success in South America. Indeed, some of the Peruvian Humbisa were able to improve the supply and quality of the heads supplied by the Dayak and Sumba, to the extent now that the Papuan product is the world leader and the one most requested by museums worldwide. It is hoped that the nascent production in South Sudan will add to the supply, as many museums now. Yours truly, Harold Hargreaves. For obvious reasons, and all these places were real, the names were real because there were people passing through from Java and Indonesia. We sent it off and we sat around, and on Christmas Eve, in the middle of the rains, this rather bedraggled man in a suit appeared in Karen Country Club with a box of chocolates and a large magnum of champagne. And he went to the bar and he inquired for Harold Hargreaves. Nah, no Harold Hargreaves here. No. And then somebody suddenly realised that's the guy who was supposed to have written the letter. What we discovered was there was the box of chocolates, and there was a magnum of champagne, and there was a note for from the chief personnel officer of Unilever UK to the effect that after 30 years as a personnel officer, he has received many, many letters, most of them boring in the extreme. But to be quite honest, our letter, or your letter, had made his Christmas. Would you please accept this gift as a token of his appreciation?